More than a decade of flawless execution unraveled in less than a dozen seconds. That was the exact time it took for Claire Mitchell, the founder's daughter, and now Lysar Systems' chief executive officer, to look up from her phone, utter a phrase completely out of place in a boardroom, and instantly bring my career to a halt. No forewarning, no build-up, no dialogue. I had witnessed project setbacks that involved more discussion than my dismissal ever did. My name is Thomas Hall. I am 44 years old. Until that very moment, I held the position of Chief Operating Officer at Lysar Systems, a technology operations consultancy focused on accuracy, logistics, and delivering results. We were the invisible force behind other operational systems. We like to say I ensured it functioned as smoothly as a Swiss mechanism. Every workflow, every detail, every client expectation was met promptly, within budget, and without any complications. People often describe me as the kind of person who could organize disorder alphabetically, which I took as a compliment. When I became part of the company, it was a modest team of 5 working out of a subleased space above a Thai eatery. The atmosphere was a mix of fish sauce scent and hungry ambition. I stayed because I believed in structure, in crafting something neat, systematic, and enduring. I implemented automated processes before it became a popular term. I personally coached every new manager. Richard Mitchell, the founder, once said, "Thomas was the backbone of the company." Claire was still attending college at that time. And there I was, halfway through a quarterly operations review, switching to the revenue chart when Claire cut in. "Thomas," she said. She glanced at her phone, her thumbs swiping over something meaningless. "I believe we're finished here." I hesitated. "The review score, with you." The room fell completely silent. Even the air conditioning seemed to pause. I scanned the executives around me. No one dared meet my gaze. At last, she looked up. "You're simply too intense. People sense judgment in your dedication." I awaited more, a joke, a grin, some witty comment to give it meaning, but none came. That was the conclusion. My hands remained steady. I did not question why or ask if she was joking. I closed the folder slowly and intentionally, the way you shut a dossier you know will never reopen. Rising, I adjusted my tie. It was navy, always navy, paired with a crisp white shirt and neatly pressed trousers. Not fashion-forward, not trendy, just precise. Professionalism as armor, uniformity as comfort. She was already back on her phone. Without another word, I left. I did not pack a box or clear my desk. Everything had already found its place. That was my method. Controlled, reliable, no excess, physical or emotional. I placed my access badge on my assistant's desk as I passed. She glanced up, panic shadowing her face. I offered a brief nod. She started to speak, but stopped. It was unnecessary. I understood. Outside, the sun shone too brightly. The parking lot sat too empty. I remained in my car for several moments, watching a maintenance worker struggle to fit a dolly into the back of a supply van. My hands began to tremble at last, not from fear but from sheer disbelief. I was far from naive. I knew Claire Mitchell had never truly cared for me. Her father admired what I created, yet she never recognized the worth of discipline. She focused solely on atmosphere and energy, on making work entertaining. She transformed the Monday operations meeting into something called Mocha and Metrics, where we were expected to sip artisanal coffee and celebrate achievements before addressing the actual agenda. I put up with it. I tolerated much for the sake of remaining relevant. However, at some point, being relevant ceased to be sufficient. Later that night in my apartment, I gazed at my bookshelf, filled with rows of meticulously labeled binders and hard drives, backups, logs, and standard operating procedure manuals. I had constructed Lysar's operational structure from the ground up. It had survived 4 chief financial officers, 3 human resources directors, and even a global pandemic. Yet none of that prevented me from feeling utterly replaceable. I replayed her words over again. "People feel judged by your work ethic." That phrase pierced me deeply, like a nail through the hand. What was she trying to say by that? That arriving early, meeting deadlines, and holding others accountable was offensive? That demanding competence was somehow oppressive? Maybe it was true. Perhaps I had become obsolete. One of those individuals who kept things running, yet made others uneasy in the process. The most painful part was not the insult or even the rejection. It was the sheer nonchalance with which it occurred, as if the 12 years I devoted were a mere file she could erase with a single click. It felt as if I were not a person, but a mere mechanism that had simply outlived its purpose. Claire Mitchell did not dismiss me because of an error I made. She let me go because my success made others look inferior, just by me doing my job correctly. That evening, sleep eluded me. I sat at my desk while the clock ticked steadily, a constant reminder that I had nowhere to go. I considered sending a message to the board of directors, explaining the situation, backing it up with quarterly figures and internal benchmarks. Yet I chose not to. Let them puzzle it out. Let them experience the slowdown when the one who kept everything running smoothly was gone. There was no need to shout or plead. All I had to do was leave, and that is exactly what I did. I left quietly. The real disturbance began only after my departure. It was not long before the cracks started to appear. By the end of the first week, 3 discreet messages from former coworkers had arrived, each one cautious but carrying the same message. Thomas Hall, things are falling apart. Payments to suppliers were delayed. The forecasting system I built to alert us automatically about client requirements had been turned off because nobody knew how to operate it. The compliance team forgot to file the updated regulatory documents with the state board. The quarterly workforce optimization report, which I usually delivered with impeccable timing, had been completely ignored. In essence, Lizzer was struggling to manage itself without constraints. I kept silent. No public statements, no private complaints, no LinkedIn updates, not even a hint of passive-aggressive emails. I simply vanished. But my absence said enough. And perhaps. The noise was louder than anything I could have voiced. Yet, it still did not feel right. Not truly. There was a brief sense of satisfaction. Honestly, I would be dishonest if I claimed otherwise. Seeing the machine fall apart without the man who created it was a kind of ego boost. But after that initial satisfaction faded, all that remained was a harsh bitterness, because the reality was that I depended on that machine just as much. Without Lizar, my days lacked any framework. My mornings blurred into afternoons. I kept brewing coffee at the usual time, as if it were automatic, but there was no longer a purpose for it, no dashboards to analyze, no meetings to anchor my hours. I wandered around my apartment, a quiet and chilly place, as unwelcoming as a storage unit. I had organized everything with the same relentless precision I applied to my work. Cabinets labeled, spices sorted alphabetically, socks folded with military precision in the drawer. I used to believe that such order gave me freedom. Now it felt like a self-imposed prison. At night, I found myself scanning their press releases, their social media, even their Glassdoor page like a heartbroken ex passing by an old home. Lights were out, and I wondered who lived there now. Headlines began to change. Lizar delays client launches. Leadership shakeup at the tech consulting giant. I clicked on each article with the grim fascination of watching a car wreck unfold in slow motion. Then, on a Thursday afternoon, my phone rang. An unknown number. I did not pick up. A minute later, a text appeared. It said, "Thomas, this is..." Mitchell from the board wanted to speak with me. I did not answer. They called again the following day. This time it was Patricia Lorme, the chief financial officer. She said, "Tom, if you are willing, we could really use a few hours of your time. We are considering bringing you back as a consultant to help stabilize the situation." I stared at that message for a long time. It was not that I did not expect them to reach out, but I was taken aback by how empty it felt. I responded with a single sentence. "You terminated me. Handle your problems by yourselves." A few minutes later, she replied, "We did not fire you, Tom. Claire did. We were not involved in that decision." That stopped me cold, not because I doubted her. Claire had always made decisions on her own, but because I realized how deeply I had assumed my departure was supported by everyone. I had never even thought that someone might have fought for me or cared, which somehow made it even more painful. That evening, I stood in my kitchen cleaning the counters twice, even though it was unnecessary. I kept opening and closing the refrigerator door without removing anything. I stood by the sink drinking tap water as though it was medicine. I was spiraling, but in a very methodical, focused way, with repetitive actions that created an illusion of control. Then I received a voicemail. "Tom," she said, and I felt my shoulders tense. "Claire told me, You are making this situation harder than it has to be. The board is panicking. Everyone is acting like this is a disaster. It is not. It is simply a change. You chose to leave, remember? We did not force you out. I was just... She was straightforward. There was a moment of silence. Then she exhaled deeply. I could hear her typing once again, even through the recording. This is not personal. I need you to understand that I listened to it twice. Not because I was seeking clarification. You said exactly what I expected, she explained. It was not personal. Those words made my jaw tighten painfully. If it was not personal, why did it cut through me as if it were 12 years old? My name was not only on the documents, it was embedded in the framework, in every protocol, every efficiency model, every perfect integration. I was part of the core, my mark on the foundation of that organization. Yet to her I was simply a misplaced component, an obsolete element in the machine, a barrier to the culture. I did not return her call. I did not even erase the voicemail. I allowed it to linger in my inbox like an untreated wound. That night, I lay awake in bed, the ceiling fan softly whirring above me, silence filled only by my own heartbeat. I considered what it might feel like to step back through those doors as a consultant, a hired expert, a temporary fix. I pictured it briefly, then dismissed the thought. I decided to let them struggle and falter. I had given them my calm, now they must face the storm. The mornings began to seem longer than the nights. Without appointments or targets to structure my days, time became fluid and blurred. I still woke at 5:45 out of routine more than necessity. I maintained my habits, showering, shaving, and brewing coffee just as I always had. 2 scoops, French press, brewed for 3 minutes. Yet, after that, there was nowhere left for the ritual to lead me. No urgent tasks looming, no spreadsheets demanding attention. I began jotting down in a journal. Nothing extraordinary, merely thoughts, lists, questions, and reflections. Mainly trying to confront the one question that had started circling my mind relentlessly like a hawk. Why did people feel judged by my dedication to work? Not disliked, not frightened. Simply judged. I never knew how to operate with less than full effort. Never had. So I wrote obsessively, just as I worked obsessively, filling pages with memories, conducting a detailed examination of a personality shaped by exactness. And in the stillness, I started recalling things long forgotten. My father often came home late, not due to working overtime, but simply late, unpredictable, sometimes intoxicated, sometimes charming. You never could tell which version would enter the door. Our kitchen table was a battleground of overdue bills, unfinished meals, and unanswered questions. There was no order, no flow, only chaos murmuring beneath everything like faulty wiring. So I established rules. As a child, I arranged my school supplies every night before sleeping. I pressed my clothes when I was 12. I set timers for homework and then timers for the breaks in between. I learned early that if I could not control the world around me, I could at least control myself. Discipline was not optional. It was a means of survival. At Lysar, they believed I was rigid, cold, and inflexible. But nobody ever noticed where it originated. Nobody saw the child sitting quietly at a table, waiting for a father who had forgotten him. They only observed the man with the folder, the schedule, and the 1,000-yard stare that silently declared, "Missing deadlines is not an option here." Last Tuesday, I strolled across the campus of Westbridge University, where I had studied operations management many years ago. The brick buildings appeared smaller than I remembered. Everything felt gentler now, more polished, and more courteous. I stopped by the faculty lounge and inquired if Professor Langley was still teaching. He was. He looked older, naturally, but his eyes remained sharp and warm at the same time. We shared coffee at a small campus cafe with reclaimed wood tables, while students debated philosophy nearby by the window. "You were unstoppable," he laughed. "I recall you commanding your group in project methods. What did you tell them? Efficiency is not a democracy." I smiled, feeling a bit embarrassed. "You were brilliant," he added. "But back then you treated every project as if it were a matter of life or death." "It was," I replied before I could stop myself. He gave me a look that was neither judgmental nor surprised, simply knowing. Somehow, that stung even more. We talked a bit longer about the job, the firing, and the silence I carried when I left. He did not offer advice, only this phrase that I kept repeating. Sometimes people do not want to be saved, they just want to be seen. On my way home, I could not get it out of my mind. Back in the apartment, I flipped through the journal once again. I wrote it down at the top of a new page, then just stared at the words. I didn't rescue people at Lysar. I refined them. I improved their systems. I transformed their chaos into structure. Whether they appreciated it or not, maybe they saw it as judgment. Perhaps it truly was judgment. 2 days later, a message popped up on LinkedIn. "Hey, Tom, can we talk?" It was Ian, one of the junior project managers at Lysar. We often clashed, almost every week. He despised my methods, claiming they stifle creativity. Once he compared my rules to prison bars. We met at a quiet cafe by the river. He looked weary and unshaven. Immediately he confessed things were worse than he had let on. He had taken over some operational reports I usually managed. "It's chaos," he said. "I didn't understand it. I genuinely didn't. I used to think you were too intense." I stayed silent and listened. "But you made us stronger," he admitted at last. "Even if we resented you for it." That hit harder than I expected. Not praise or forgiveness, but honest truth. He asked if I was back to consulting. I answered, "Not yet." He nodded as if he got it. Yet, as we shook hands and parted ways, I caught something else in his eyes, something resembling deep regret. That evening, alone in the dark, I reread the last weeks of journal notes. Every sentence echoed the same question in the countless ways. Who am I without this work? And I didn't have an answer. I had shaped myself into something indispensable. The man who repaired everything, the one who kept all the pieces united. Now, with no one left to support, I felt weightless and without purpose. I picked up the pen once more, but did not write. Instead, I spoke the words softly just to catch their echo in the room. Perhaps I had forgotten how to exist without being indispensable. The email arrived at 6:03 in the morning, placed between a bank statement and a grocery delivery notification. The subject read "Proposal from the board." I read it 3 times before even standing to pour my coffee. It was a formal offer to become Chief Operating Officer, granting full control over operations and direct reporting to the board. There was no mention of Claire Mitchell, no hint of consultancy work. This was a real position at the table again. No caveats. It should have felt like a victory, like the last piece clicking into place. I should have wanted it, but I remained at the counter, my coffee cooling, my heart silent. Something inside me had shifted. Maybe everything had. Still, I accepted a meeting, driven by curiosity perhaps, or pride, or some faint remaining sense of obligation I had not yet abandoned. The boardroom looked exactly as I remembered it. Frosted glass, cool blue lighting, and Scandinavian furniture that prioritized style over comfort. 6 of them sat around the table, 4 physically present, 2 on screens. Mitchell, Patricia, Young, the names I knew all too well. They started by discussing numbers, investor reactions, client uncertainty, and the damage since I left. Then the discussion turned. Claire Mitchell was being phased out, Mitchell said. The risk was too great. The investors insisted on a complete restart. I told them, "I am your restart." Patricia added, "You are the sole reason this company ever operated so smoothly, and the only one capable of fixing it before the 4th quarter. The silence that followed was neither tense nor emotional. It was calculated and intentional, Mitchell said. "We are offering you full operational control, with no interference, not even from us. Return as Chief Operating Officer with executive veto power. Set your conditions." Such authority once made my hands restless. I was deeply involved in the details, but always knew how to pull the necessary levers. This was a lever powerful enough to move the entire operation. Yet, I did not respond right away. "Give me the weekend," I said. Later that evening, I wandered without thinking through the quiet residential streets behind my apartment. I eventually found myself in the park. It was early autumn, with trees beginning to drop their leaves, orange foliage scattered on the path like cast-off skin. That was when I noticed Claire. She sat on a bench beneath an elm tree, earbuds in, watching a dog dash across the grass, as though unaware its leash had broken. She spotted me before I could turn, removing her earbuds, and nodded. "You got the offer," she said. I remained silent. "I told them you would refuse it. Why? Because you are too proud." That earned a dry laugh from me. "No," I said. "I am only now learning to say no to things that feel like a prison." She focused on the dog and said, "You are brilliant, Tom, but you have a way of making others feel insignificant." I sat down next to her. Not near enough, just barely enough. Perhaps they are insignificant, I said, and maybe I am tired of shrinking myself to accommodate them. She did not flinch, simply nodded slowly. We remained like that for a minute. The silence between us was more genuine than any words we had ever exchanged. I did not hate you, she said finally. I simply did not want my worth to be measured by you. That was never my aim. It made no difference. You entered a room, and people immediately began to question their own standards. That kind of presence overwhelms people who are not built like you. I did not overwhelm them, I said. I supported them. The weight was the same in the end. She stood up and brushed leaves off her coat. Whatever path you choose, just make sure you are not chasing illusions, she said. Sometimes power is just another type of shackle. And then she left. No apology, no debate, just gone. That evening, I sat in a diner off Westfield Avenue, vinyl benches, cheap coffee, jazz music leaking from an old speaker above. I opened my journal, but did not write. I watched steam rise from my cup and asked myself the single most important question. Did I desire this because it truly mattered, or because they finally acknowledged that I mattered? That difference felt like everything. I reflected on my former office, my color-coded folders, my calendar that never flashed red. I thought about Ian and Langley and the younger version of myself who lined up pencils for comfort in a world that felt unsafe. And then I considered what it would mean to return, to fix it all, to save them once more, to be necessary again. I closed the journal and left $20 on the table. The following morning, I responded to the board's proposal with just one line. You don't want me returning. You want a shield. No greeting, no sign-off. Simply the truth. There was no reply, no counter-proposal. 7 days later, another message arrived. Claire officially resigned. I didn't feel victorious, nor did I experience regret. I only felt alert. I stepped away once more, but this time it was my conscious choice. Half a year later, I am sitting in a brightly lit co-working space located in the corner of a renovated warehouse. There are exposed bricks, lofty ceilings, and plants I actually remember to water. No ping-pong tables, no motivational slogans on the walls, just calm, focus, and minimalism. This is my version of paradise. The name of my company is Hall Systems. No tagline, no fluff. I never aimed to create a monument. I simply wanted a place where work held genuine meaning again. A place where structure did not stifle creativity, but rather became the foundation supporting it. My team is modest. 4 employees, 5 steady clients, mainly startups, and a few medium-sized tech companies losing time and money through countless hidden faults. They come to me half anxious, sensing something is wrong, but unable to pinpoint the issue. That's where I step in. I diagnose operational chaos like a mechanic with X-ray vision. For the first 3 months, I did not even launch a website. Clients arrived through recommendations, former interns, and vendors I treated fairly. Even a few. The chief financial officer from Lysar, now long gone, used to recall how I would walk through their offices carrying a clipboard and a detailed plan. I have become the person people reach out to when the house is burning, yet the fire alarm remains silent. I am not striking or showy, but I get results. For the first time in many years, that truly feels sufficient. My daily routine has shifted significantly. I still wake up early at 5:45, like clockwork, but I take a walk before logging onto my computer. This allows me some breathing space to think clearly. My apartment still resembles a surgical room, but I have grown comfortable with that. Control no longer dominates me. Instead, it becomes a support system. The difference is profound. During the afternoons, I meet with clients either in person or through video calls. I guide young founders to recognize their blind spots and navigate complexities. I assist new operations managers in adopting systems they were unaware of needing. However, I no longer control every conversation. I ask more questions than I answer and create room for others to make mistakes. Such an approach was once unimaginable to me, but now it feels like genuine mentorship. Just 1 week ago, I sat opposite a 27-year-old CEO who reminded me of my younger self. Intelligent, meticulous, yet completely overwhelmed. She presented her process map, carefully color-coded and thorough. I listened attentively, offering nods at the right moments, and then I asked, which aspects of this work because of you, and which parts would function without your involvement? She blinked, leaned back, and had no response. That was our starting point. I have learned to embrace silence in new ways, allowing people to reach their own insights instead of forcing conclusions upon them. True wisdom does not always need to be loud. Sometimes it comes in the form of a perfectly timed pause. This morning, I was going over a timeline suggestion from one of my analysts, a bright young man named Remy, who just finished graduate school and is incredibly sharp. He proposed a way to simplify a client's onboarding procedure. I watched him present his idea with the same eager confidence I used to rely on as my shield. As he finished, my phone buzzed. An unknown caller. I let it ring twice before picking up. "Tom," the voice said. "Claire." I leaned back in my chair, letting the moment linger. She explained it was about downsizing. "Lizar, we lost 2 significant accounts, and the board is reorganizing again." I stayed silent. Then she admitted, "You were right." Her voice sounded older, not broken, but tired. It wasn't the work itself, but how the people who did it were treated. For a moment, I thought about asking why she was calling, what exactly she needed, but deep down, I already understood. "Thank you," I said. She hesitated. "For what?" she asked. "For letting me go." Another pause. I added, "You set me free from being a ghost inside someone else's machine." She made a sound, half laugh, half sigh. "Well," she said, "I guess that makes one of us." We ended the call quietly. I put the phone down and turned back to my desk. Remy was still there, eyes wide with concern. "Everything all right?" he asked. "Everything's absolutely fine," I replied. And it truly was. There were no nameplates on my door, no diplomas in frames, no photos of anyone. No formal greetings with executives or corporate offsites, just a whiteboard filled with genuine challenges and practical solutions, alongside a team discovering how to solve problems independently. I have stopped aiming to be indispensable. Instead, I focus on being helpful, accessible, a guide rather than a support to lean on. Claire Mitchell walked over to my desk, her notebook in hand. She asked a brief question about the schedule. Would it be better to deliver the onboarding materials all at once, or spread them out during the client's integration phase? I leaned back in my chair, resting my arms on the armrests. Sunlight glanced off her notebook's corner. I could have given an immediate reply, but I chose to respond, "What are your thoughts?" She smiled, paused briefly, then explained her perspective. Deliberate, insightful, and clear. I listened carefully. This time, I smiled back.